Most business owners that appear as guests on podcasts do so because they think it's going to help them get more
exposure, brand awareness, or get more leads.
And yeah, all of those things are true. But what you don't understand is that podcast is going to do something for your business that is far greater than any of that. And ultimately, it's going to be the thing that's going to lead to more conversion in your business, but not in the way that you think. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what being a guest on podcast is going to do for you, the high-ticket business owner that is selling something online that requires a very high level of trust before someone buys. So if you're new to the channel, all we talk about here is not only getting booked on the top podcasts in your specific industry, but more importantly, sharing all of the tactics and strategies that you can use to turn those conversations into conversions. All right, so I don't want to waste any time here. See, here's the thing. You're watching this right now and you're somebody that sells something that's typically expensive. Right? Maybe thousands, tens of thousands, hell, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. We work with clients that have real estate funds that require minimums of $100,000 to invest. So with that being said, let's start off at the top. Why should you even go on podcasts? What does it really do for you? Sure.
Awareness, leads, exposure.
All of these different things. But it's so much more than that. And that is what all of these corny marketers do not understand. And why am I so passionate like that? Why do I call it corny? Hell, you might even be watching me saying, Devin, you're one of those corny people. Whatever. I know I'm corny. At least I admit it. I'm corny in my own way, damn it, okay? And I like it, and there's nothing you can say about it. But when I say corny, what I mean is very surface level, where a lot of people just read books and they're like,
this is marketing and stuff like that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But how I always like to approach being a guest on podcasts is understanding what is the core constraint that it is going to help solve in a business owner's business. And where I like to start is ultimately with the end in mind, which is you appear as a guest on podcast because in one way, shape, or form, you believe that is going to help you generate more revenue inside of your business. Isn't that why we do any form of marketing? So whether you're saying, hey, I want to do it for awareness or exposure, what I always ask people is I say, okay, but what's the so that? I get exposure, I get awareness so that XYZ happens. Finish that sentence for me. Every time so that I can get more business, so that I can scale, so I can do these things. But in order in today's modern marketplace to get people to pay you a lot of money for your services, what that typically requires is what I call psychological safety. And what I mean when I say psychological safety is you need to understand this. In today's modern marketplace, people have been burned time and time and time and time again by all of these people that promised them the world and weren't able to deliver on what it is that they had promised. So every time that happens, they take a hit. Your ideal client, reflect on you. Hell, I'm going to tell you, I've been in this shoes, signed up for stuff they didn't deliver. And every time that happens, first time it happens, damn, I'm upset that didn't work. They try again, didn't happen again. What the heck's going on here? Tried again, didn't happen again. And what ends up happening is that your ideal client, you, me, whoever it is, they form a certain, what we call mental model, where a mental model is ultimately how they come to view the world. So as you, the high ticket business owner that sells something where you're asking people for a lot of money, the problem is that the people that we're trying to sell to in today's economy, once again, reflect on your own experience, the mental model is currently being shaped by all of these bad experiences. So now what ends up happening is that this mental model that they have, which was formed by their negative past experiences, then gets placed onto you as the business owner. So now when you are asking people to hand over $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, subconsciously and consciously, they're thinking to themselves that this is going to be like all of the other negative experiences that I've had, where people sounded really good on the phone or the webinar or whatever type of sales conversation you specifically have, but they didn't deliver. And the thing that's ultimately ruling that is the mental model that is created or has been created within that person. But look how it was created. It was created through repetitive negative experiences. And as a result of those negative experiences, they've come to shape the worldview that person has, how they look at investing in themselves and making these decisions, etc. So ultimately, what's ended up happening is that these mental models that people have formed, ultimately they view any time that they have to invest a lot of money with a very, very very, very high sense of risk. So based off of my past experiences where I have invested a lot of money in myself, they turned out to be very poor decisions. So now any decision going forward, I look at as being extremely risky. And here's the thing, any investment that you make in your business is going to be a risk. But the thing is that there's levels to what I call perceived risk. Because here's the thing, before you invest in something, the risk that you are attributing to that decision, it's not actual risk. It is risk that is based upon your perception of that risk, which is defined by your past. So how risky you view a decision to be is based off of your perception, and your perception is formed from your past experience. So therefore, what ends up happening is the level of perceived risk that somebody has when it comes to the investment is based off of all of those negative experiences. So how does this tie into everything that I'm talking about with podcasts? Well, see, here's the thing. All of this right here ties into psychological safety. So the more perceived risk that somebody has when it comes to investing in something, the less psychologically safe that they feel. And the less psychologically safe that somebody feels, the less likely they are to invest into something. And that is why your sales team or you are probably feeling like the leads are colder. You're probably saying something to yourself like, man, why are so many people delaying decisions now? Why is it harder to close on one call? Why is everybody telling me they got to wait 24 hours? Can I speak to clients? And ultimately, there's a very high level of perceived risk in the minds of your ideal client. So with that being said, hopefully this is making sense. Where in today's modern marketplace, psychological safety is at such a low level based upon people's past experiences, which has shaped their mental model, which has influenced them to look at any decision that they make with a very high level of perceived risk. So if we know that people have a very high level of perceived risk in today's modern marketplace based upon their negative past experiences, well, what's the opposite side of risk? Well, the opposite side of risk, the other side of the coin, is certainty. Certainty. People ultimately want to feel extremely certain, or as certain as humanly possible, that investing in something is going to help them get the desired outcome. And that is when people have a very high level of psychological safety. So the more certainty that we help people feel, the more psychologically safe they are going to feel. And the more psychologically safe somebody will feel, the more likely that they are to invest in our high-ticket product or service. So the thing that we are ultimately looking to optimize for in today's modern marketplace as a business owner is not even conversion. It is influencing our prospects to feel as psychologically safe with us, our company, our business as possible, because that is the thing that's going to drive conversion. Hey, listen, before we continue the video, if you're a business owner and you want to scale your business and you want to build your brand, and you know that being a guest on podcast is going to be a vehicle for you to get in front of more qualified leads, we would love to support you on that journey. Down below, you'll see a link to speak to the team where we can show you exactly how we will get you placed on some of the top podcasts in your specific industry so you can begin generating more qualified calls. So just tap the link below and we'll get you squared away. Let's get back to the video. Now, with that being said, if that's the case, if that's what we know, where if we want more people to invest, they first have to feel psychologically safe. Well, how do we influence people to feel psychologically safe? Where does psychological safety come from? Well, I want you to reflect back on any experience that you've had with somebody where you've come to feel safe around. You're able to be yourself. You're able to just feel like that person is there for you. You feel safe. Well, in order to first feel psychologically safe with somebody, you must first come to trust that person, where you feel like they have your best interest in mind. You feel like you can come to them, etc. So the only way that we get people, our prospects, to feel psychologically safe enough to pull the trigger to make a buying decision, well, they must first trust us. They must first come to see us as different from people that they've worked with in the past. But here's the key concept that I want to communicate. The only way that we get people to trust us is to understand how we spell the word trust. This is what I tell my clients all the time here. We do not spell trust, T-R-U-S-T. The way we spell trust is T-I-M-E, meaning the more time we get people to spend with us before we ask them for $1, the more they are going to trust us. And the more they trust us, the more psychologically safe they feel with us. And the more psychologically safe they feel with us, the more likely they are to convert. Now think about this for a second. The more time somebody spends with your brand, with your company, with you, getting to know you, the more they are going to see how you're different from everything that they've done in the past, how you're different from all of the companies that they've done. And ultimately, here's the thing. When you get people to spend time with you before entering your sales process, there's a very low level of what? Perceived risk. Because you're not asking them for $1. You're just providing value to them. So now where podcasts come into play is by you being a guest on podcast, you're not entering a sales conversation with that person where you're asking them like you traditionally would with a paid ad or a cold email.
Hey, let's get on a call. I'm going to do a discovery call or
Oh my God, everybody knows it's a freaking sales call. And what happens? Based upon their negative past experiences, they project that onto that sales conversation. And immediately there's a very high level of perceived risk. But when you go on a podcast and you just show up and you add value and you just pour into the audience, but a big thing here that we work with our clients on is how do you take that podcast conversation and turn it into a subconscious sales mechanism so that from the start of the episode to the end of the episode, along that journey, that person who's your ideal client comes to the natural conclusion that they need that offer. But how do we do that? Okay, we have videos where we talk about that in depth. So by you going on a podcast allows you to get in front of your audience for 60 minutes. So now 60 minutes has been spent with you with your ideal client if you're compelling enough on that podcast, which is something that is a topic for another discussion. Now we're increasing the amount of time that we get our ideal client to spend with us, therefore influencing the more they trust us or increasing the level of trust that they have with us, therefore making them feel safer, which is the thing that's ultimately going to lead to them buying more of our stuff. So now imagine you don't go on one podcast, but now you go on another podcast. So now that same 60 minutes has turned into 120 minutes. And then you continue to go. And then this number continues to compound and compound and compound and compound. So now what ends up happening is that somebody comes, and this is what I love to say, somebody comes to the natural conclusion that you are the specific person to solve their specific problem. And when that happens, people have a very high level of certainty. But the cool part of what we've done here is that throughout this podcast, you added genuine value to that person where there was no risk for that individual involved. Because in today's modern marketplace, people look at sales conversations as some form of manipulation a lot of the time.
Well, I know what you're doing. You're trying to do these sales tactics where I know you listen to that sales trainer, etc.
But when you go on a podcast, instead of you trying to convince them, they convince themselves. And the best part is this. Why do people listen to podcasts in the first place? Because they're looking to solve a specific problem within their business. In other words, they are very high intent. They are there for a specific reason. I always talk about it, and what I usually tell people is you being a guest on podcasts is going to help you sell to the people that are already sold. They just do not know that your specific solution exists yet. So with that being said, when you get in front of audiences that are already looking to actively solve their problem, they have a very high intent. The only thing is that they do not know about your solution. And when you do present your solution to them via a podcast, you're getting them to spend time with you. And the more time that they're spending with you, the more that they're going to trust you. And the more that they trust you, the more psychologically safe they feel. Why? Because it increases the level of certainty that they have in their mind that you are the person that can solve their problem. And when they come to that conclusion by themselves with no outside influence, that is when you will convert at a higher level. That is a very bad dollar sign, but I think you get the damn point. That is when your sales team is going to thank you. That is when you're going to stop hearing all of these damn objections. And by the way, if you think that I'm totally off with this, I want you to look at any one of your favorite influencers. Let's take Alex Hormozi, who sold $106 million of ultimately a book and a course in 24 hours. How did he do that? Well, the reason that he was able to do that was because people felt so psychologically safe investing in that. Why did they feel safe? Because they felt like they could trust him. Well, why did they feel like they could trust him? Because they had spent so much time with his brand in a way that had such a low level of perceived risk through the form of content. But if you study the type of content that Alex Hormozi originally got started with, it was all podcasts. And then he took those podcasts, and then from those podcasts, he created all different types of content. But what did he understand? He understood that if he wanted to convert at the highest level possible, he first had to make people feel safe enough. And the way you make people feel safe enough is if you first get them to trust you. But the way that you get people to trust you is by getting them to spend time with you, but making sure that the way that they spend time with you and your brand is in a way where there is such a low level of perceived risk, where that value that you add influences people to come to the natural conclusion that you are the specific person that they need to solve their specific problem, where now there is such a high level of certainty in their mind that whatever dollar amount you ask, they are willing to invest. So you being a guest on podcasts is going to help you solve the most fundamental problem that exists in today's modern marketplace, which is the fact that so many people, based off of their negative past experiences, have such a high level of perceived risk and low psychological safety that they don't make decisions, that it's easier to stay where they are than to make a decision and have it turn out like the past experiences. So very simply put, if you have a sales team, if you're looking to make more sales, you being a guest on podcasts is going to be the thing that can actually help you solve the most foundational and critical problem that exists, not only in your business, but in today's modern marketplace, period.